Good afternoon to members of the media who are here with us this afternoon, and thank you for joining us as we come to an end of the second EU Caribbean Global Gateway Conference on Sargassum, which took place yesterday and today. Joining me at the table is Mr. Felix Fernandez Shaw. He is the director, let me give him his correct title, Director B for Latin America and the Caribbean. And joining him is our, I will use the word, resident ambassador to the EU, who's resident in Barbados but is often in Grenada, and with responsibility for Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean. And I want to thank both of them for being with us this afternoon. They have been our partners in this Sargassum conference. We also wish to recognize, although he's not here, Didicus Jules, who is obviously Director General of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean State Secretariat. He had to leave for his flight with me, but he's represented. So let me point that out. And with me is Minister James, whose team has led to a large extent a lot of the work required to ensure that this second Sargassum conference was a success. I will invite Mr. Shaw to make brief remarks about his impressions and takeaway from the conference, and then I will also do the same and make some announcements as to what are the next steps coming out of this conference, because we did not have a conference for having a conference sake. Sargassum, as you know, is a major challenge for the Caribbean, and so we want to ensure that coming out of this there are concrete actions that we will take to follow up on to make sure that the region as a whole can begin to address this matter. So, over to you, Mr. Shaw.
Thanks a lot, Prime Minister, and good afternoon to the members of the media. And thanks again, Prime Minister, Minister James, Didicus is not here, and on his behalf, Chamberlain and Gosia, our ambassador here in Grenada, and to the OECS for the fantastic opportunity to have around 400 people come here to Grenada to discuss about how do we turn Sargassum from a threat to an opportunity, from a problem into a resource. And it was important because when we started talking at the very beginning, some months ago, with the Prime Minister and with the OECS, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, our collective thinking was there's a lot of talk, there's a lot of studies, there's a lot of people trying to solve but not really solving, and in the meantime Caribbean beaches are impacted heavily on a social, economic and environmental aspects. And we had agreed to bring everyone to help us again build a value chain, turn the tide from a threat to an opportunity. And that's why we brought people from the international financial institutions and international community. We brought the governments. Prime Minister Mitchell brought the governments of the Caribbean, but not only the Caribbean states, but the wider Caribbean basin, with the international organizations, financing institutions. We came here as Team Europe with member states, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, Netherlands, etc., etc. And we wanted to meet here together with the private sector, those who are piloting solutions, the industry who already has processing, chemical processing of seaweed, transport solutions, collection solutions, storage solutions, early detection solutions, everything that needs to go along the different components of the value chain. And I must confess that we were surprised by the welcoming here in Grenada, how I think important has been the atmosphere here, thanks to the welcoming characteristic here in Grenada, but also the fact that these conversations have quickly taken root as to everybody focusing on building a value chain. It's very difficult to build a value chain if you don't have Sargassum, if you don't stop it from coming into the beach, but you rather go for it before it comes to the beach. And therefore what we wanted to discuss is how do we work on this. It's not an easy issue because there are many actors. Everybody wants to help. Everybody has its own way of approaching things, the business, the international financial institutions, the governments, civil society, fishing communities, research, universities. We managed to get them all together, and we managed to look a bit into the future by saying, let's all focus on building a value chain. This will take time. This is not something that we're going to do tomorrow, but there are many million tons of sargassum floating every year, and before it was a problem, we need to slowly start turning it into a solution. And for that we need pilot projects, we need programs. There are issues, there are ideas coming out of Mexico and Dominican Republic, but these are larger scale ideas. What we're looking also is to do proof of concept of how profitable it can be to work in smaller island developing states, how profitable it can be to invest in the local solutions, and we have had plenty of that. So also the international community was called in to help with financing and with technical assistance, with ideas, exchange of experiences. The region has spoken about frameworking, about coordination, about coherence, but also about development of national plans, enhancing predictability. There's a whole number of things that we all need to work on. But at the same time, we need to move. So I'm also very happy to note that many islands are starting to move. Many ministers told us today that they have learned things that they didn't know, and they have shared what the private companies or the international financial institutions did not know about what the governments in the Caribbean are looking for. And I think what we do is come out very strengthened in turning Sargassum from a threat to an opportunity. For us in the European Union and as part of the Global Gateway investment strategy, this is about creating a value chain that will help the Caribbean not only remove a threat, but also build a value chain that will bring opportunities, jobs, technology, growth, social benefits, etc., etc. And this is what we really wanted to offer today, and then hence the European Union will be able to and be willing to support the efforts in the Caribbean and the efforts led by Prime Minister Mitchell into turning this tide. So thanks a lot again for your leadership, and to the OECS for the convening power.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw, and I want to use the opportunity to thank the European Union and you and the team in Barbados for the significant work that you've done and the partnership in ensuring that the conference took place, but more crucially for the, I think, long-term partnership that is required to make sure that this becomes a success. The ultimate goal is to really turn the tide and to change what has become a significant risk, a significant challenge for us in the Caribbean that has negatively impacted tourism, fisheries, coastal communities. That is a major risk to environment and to personal health for many of our citizens. And so the aim of bringing everyone from the region together was to ensure that we can have urgent and coordinated regional action to tackle this challenge. And so coming out of the two-day conference, as Felix said, we had the policymakers, government representatives, government ministries, we had regional bodies, ACS, CARICOM, etc. We had the business community, the entrepreneurs, the innovators, those who are already doing research, those who've already built a value chain outside of the Caribbean in this space. We have multilateral financing institutions, whether it's EIB, CAF, etc. The aim was to ensure that we had everyone in the room. And I must say that we had extensive and widespread representation from throughout the Caribbean basin, from as far as Mexico, Panama, Costa Rica, all the way down to Grenada. So we are very encouraged by the participation that occurred today, and we think there were significant exchanges of ideas, information, of expertise, and I think everyone who attended the conference came out more knowledgeable and I think certainly more energized and optimistic about the need for us to tackle this initiative. Coming out of the conference, there are a couple of things that Grenada intends to champion and to lead regionally on this issue. And some of our proposals included the creation of a regional Sargassum Secretariat, the creation of a regional Sargassum Information Hub. And we think this is critical to ensure that we have a central coordinating body for policy development, research, collaboration, and sustainable management of Sargassum efforts throughout the region. And this is important if we are going to be able to share best practices, facilitate resource mobilization for ensuring that we can have the valorization strategies become successful. And Grenada has put its hands up. We are happy to, in fact, become the location for the Secretariat and the Information Hub. And so we communicated this to the wider meeting, and we'll be looking forward to the support of our colleagues in the region to ensure that this can happen. We think it's important that someone takes the lead on this, and hence the reason why in the first place we agreed to host the second conference, because we think the time for action is now. I think most of the participants appreciated that there has been significant research, significant study, and it's ongoing. But we also need to act, because the Sargassum continues to come ashore and people in our communities continue to be impacted by it. One of the critical things that we have to be able to ensure to make sure that we have the success necessary is having the ability to successfully predict when we will have Sargassum and where the Sargassum will go. And so we have to be able to ensure that we have enhanced predictability through improved monitoring and forecasting of the Sargassum. And that obviously will require us to invest in the necessary technologies, some of which already exist, whether it's satellite tracking, whether it's the same techniques that some of our fishermen use. We have to be able to monitor, predict, and send that information and widely disseminate it, partly because it also will allow our citizens and our stakeholders to be better prepared to be able to treat with the Sargassum when it comes. It's almost like predicting what happens with hurricanes, etc. If you know we have large blooms of Sargassum heading our way, and I will get to that, the idea is that ultimately we want to be able to fish this Sargassum out of the water, rather than having to confront it on land or on shore when it's already too late. So that's one of the key takeaways that we need to ensure can happen, and we certainly believe the Information Hub and the Sargassum Secretariat can assist in that process. There's significant research going on in silos, perhaps, throughout the region. And we want to be able to ensure that all of that research is done in a more coordinated, collaborative, and sharing manner. And so we want to piggyback on some of the existing institutions and frameworks that already exist for the research, but we want to ensure that that our efforts are all being coordinated to address this issue. So whether it's research from a government or public sector perspective, whether it's research from universities or other research institutions perspective, we want to be able to ensure that we are coordinating and having a collaborative approach to the research that is taking place. And then crucially, we need to have national plans, all of us, for collecting, harvesting, processing, and utilizing the Sargassum. Not all of the countries may be able to process the Sargassum, but we certainly think at a minimum, all of us should be able to collect the Sargassum and ultimately collect and sell the Sargassum, because that's really step one in the value chain process. So part of what we are seeking to ensure happens is that each of the territories within the Caribbean Basin can develop a national plan for collecting, processing, and the utilization of Sargassum. Felix has said repeatedly, you will have no value chain if there is no Sargassum. And when we say no Sargassum, we mean we have to have control and possession of the Sargassum, rather than it simply being out there in the sea or showing up on our shores, and we are not prepared to treat or collect with it. And naturally, all of this requires financing. And so the aim, and I believe we've been successful in doing so, is to demonstrate to all of the participants the financing that's available, whether it's grant funding, whether it's reimbursable expenses, and the partners who are available to assist in the funding of the industry that we are seeking to create. But crucially as well, we want to be able to leverage the funding that is available to also unlock additional funding in the private sector, in our banks and financing institutions within the Caribbean, so that they can support the development of this industry. In the Caribbean, tourism, agriculture, etc. Are often our mainstays, but we need to look to innovation and the creation of new industries to ensure that we can continue to drive economic activity. Because Sargassum itself poses a significant threat to our tourism industry. And therefore, if we do not find ways to ensure that we can turn this threat and this challenge into economic activity, we run the risk of a double whammy. Both the tourism industry contracting, we run the risk of negative impacts on our fish stocks, and our fish potentially migrating, or fishermen not being able to in fact survive, and we will continue in a situation where we are not able to climb out of this challenge. So leveraging investments, ensuring that within the Caribbean itself we can get some of the financing to support this industry is critical. And so in conclusion, the conference has been extremely successful. The key thing for us now is to ensure that we can build on this by having practical pilots that can occur, and that we can ultimately be in a position to scale up the investments that we require in this field. So I'm happy to announce that Grenada intends to start harvesting Sargassum as a commodity and as a product. We are happy to announce that we will lead with the support of the European Union in ensuring that we can pilot the collection and sale of Sargassum by the first quarter of 2026. So we will certainly use the next 15 months to be able to create the institutional framework, the business framework, the legislative and enabling environment to ensure that this happens, because we have to lead by example. We're not holding the conference merely for the sake of holding the conference, and we think there are significant private sector investors who will also be quite keen to support this initiative. So in a sense, we are looking at government support, government policies, political will. We are looking at support from technical assistance to financial assistance from the European Union, and we're also looking for the expertise that the private sector has in the value chain to be able to allow us to do so. So in summary, that's one of the key outcomes for us in Grenada. We intend to put ourselves in a position come 2026 where we can demonstrate that coming out of this conference, we in fact have a pilot project that ultimately we believe can be scalable and can be an example for others in the region to be able to follow and join with us in beginning the process of turning the tide and converting this Sargassum challenge into economic opportunities. I want to thank Minister James and her team, because I'm really here more to look good than anything else. She's the one who's really done all of the hard work. I want to thank her. I want to thank P.S. Johnson and everyone else who's really made, from a Grenada perspective, this event a success. I certainly want to thank the over 400 plus delegates who came and who attended. And as I said at the opening of this conference, we do not underappreciate the support shown to Grenada in the aftermath of Hurricane Beryl. It could have been quite easy to say, pick another island or another country to do this. But it demonstrates the commitment of the EU, the OECS, and our partners to making sure that we can help Grenada bounce back in the face of the climatic event we had. And in a sense, Sargassum is just part of a small part of that larger climate challenge that we all face, and we have to find innovative ways, resilient and sustainable ways to be able to deal with it. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. If you have any questions, yes, if you have any questions, of course you're free to direct to whomsoever you wish to answer.
Sherry and Noel from the GIS. My first question is for you, Prime Minister. You mentioned about turning the tide and the setting up of the Secretariat / Information Hub. My question to you is the timeline for that Secretariat, and is it a Secretariat that you're looking to staff locally, or your staffing would be made up of persons from within the region?
Well, I can't give you an immediate timeline for it, but the staffing will to a large extent depend on the expertise that is required. If there's a Grenadian expertise, then certainly we would advocate for Grenadians to staff it. But the idea here is that we want the Secretariat to be able to function to support the region. So to that extent, it's probably a self-evident answer that it's likely that the staffing will not constitute only Grenadians, for the simple reason that we're not the repository of all knowledge on on all things Sargassum, and in a sense, we offering to host it But the idea is that it will serve the region in very much the same way any other regional institutions may be located in a particular territory, but serves the region.
And as chair of CARICOM at this time, what is the plan to get everyone on board? You mentioned a bit about the looking forward to harvesting the sargassum out at sea, and we know one of the issues across the region is that of marine borders. So, once it's economic and it's financially viable, what are the potential issues to be derived? So what is the plan to ensure that marine borders and everything is taken into consideration for when that actual time comes?
Well, I will answer by saying two things. The legal and governance framework will have to be sorted out to make sure that happens. But somebody has to start. No one's harvesting sargassum right now. Right? Each of us have our territorial seas, so certainly there's sargassum within our territorial seas. So I think the starting point is to be able to demonstrate that if we harvest within our territorial seas, if we harvest in a predictable manner, and if you get in the quantums, the idea here is to encourage other countries to do the same within the territorial sea. And then you aggregate, because you may have a single buyer who says, I can take everything that you have. But if you're not aggregating, then the scale may simply not be sufficient to make it viable for that buyer. So I don't envisage a challenge in us being able to have the appropriate legal or regulatory environment within our respective jurisdictions. When you get to the international seas, obviously that would also require further cooperation and further work on this. But again, there's also the whole question of predicting what happens, right? So the patterns, the flows, all of that will be taken into account. It may be that you simply wait until it's in your jurisdiction if it gets there unhindered. So I think that's just part and parcel of what we have to work through. But I want to emphasize that's not a reason to act. Because too often we use issues about jurisdiction and regulatory framework and governance about a PowerPoint presentation rather than an actual business or industry that you're trying to create. Often regulation doesn't create industry, right? You need an entrepreneur, you need a financier, you need a scientist, someone to actually say, I'm prepared to take the risk. And I think the key thing, given that we've been faced with this challenge over the last decade, is that we need to move from worrying about things like governance and regulation and so on, to the fact that we need to find solutions to addressing it. And in a sense, that's what we want to be able to. So we are satisfied that if someone leads, it will then put us in a position to have something to regulate and to have something to govern. But until we have some entity or some country and a business that is viable, then there's really nothing to regulate. And at this point in time, there is nothing to regulate, because all that is happening is that sargassum is simply washing on our shores, and we are spending millions to clean it up.
We did see a number of innovative products on exhibition here, all byproducts of the sargassum seaweed. You also mentioned that come 2026, you're looking forward for the pilot project. Apart from sargassum, are you in a position, you or the minister, to mention what are some of the proposed projects that Grenada will be bringing forward?
Well, no, I'm not in a position to say that, but I can give you, for example, the fact that the idea here is it's not Grenada in the context of the government. We actually want the private sector to be the one doing the investment, and we partner by providing an enabling environment. So, for example, when Angus came to me a couple of years ago, we just met coincidentally. We were talking about Sargassum, and he indicated that he had some partners who I think were from Sweden or Norway, I'm not sure. Sweden, right. And they were on a beach in Mexico, went for vacation. The vacation was ruined because the beach was filled with sargassum. And they were just bouncing ideas as to how to treat with this issue. And they went back to Sweden and said, there must be something we can do. They did some research, they came back, they met with Angus, and they talked about whether there was the opportunity to turn the sargassum into biogas, which can then fuel small-scale agro processing, etc. Once they told me that, I said, tell me what is required and we will support. They said, we need the biodigesters, we'll get them in, we would like some concessions. The cabinet immediately granted the concessions. And we encouraged them in particular to go to Soubise and Marquis and the areas where we know there were large blooms, so that they can actually carry out the research. And I'm giving this as an example because I'm saying obviously it takes time to develop a value chain, it takes time to develop a product. But what we need to ensure from a government perspective is that there's political will to support that. And then Sargassum still has to be financed. We need to get investors, etc. So we don't want, there are things the government can do. The government can certainly work on helping to finance and support the collection of the sargassum. We need the researchers, we need the private sector to be able to work on developing the products, right? And whether it's concessions through inputs or importation of stuff that you need to build a factory or a processing plant, obviously those are areas that we can work to support. Whether it's helping to build the ship that will go out and collect the Sargassum. But crucially for this to work, we want private industry to be driving it, and our job really is to ensure that we support and provide the enabling environment. So for all I know, there may be multiple potential uses out there. There may be other Grenadians who are doing research on this issue, whether it's from a fertilizer or other perspective. So the aim of this is to let them know that we are there to support that, that the secretariat will be created, that the hub will be created, so that they have access to people, to resources, to experts to be able to help them develop the products that they want. And it doesn't have to be Grenada only. I'm saying the Barbadian entrepreneurs, the St. Lucian entrepreneurs, Dominicans. It doesn't matter for us. It is really a regional challenge that we have to solve.
Which begs my next question. You're chairman of CARICOM, but you're also a part of the OECS. And there are certain things that get done faster within the OECS realm rather than as opposed to CARICOM. Will we be seeing an OECS front to tackling the issues of Sargassum apart from the CARICOM body?
Well, I'd say the OECS was a partner at this conference, so that should tell you the fact that the OECS has been playing a leading role in getting us to address and tackle this issue. And certainly there are some members of CARICOM that are less impacted by Sargassum, but certainly within the OECS, most of the territories are severely impacted by Sargassum, from Antigua, St. Kitts, Grenada, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, and many of these countries are heavily dependent on tourism. So we certainly perhaps have a greater need to act now because of the challenge it poses to tourism and to our fishing community.
And my final question, go ahead.
Yeah.
It's on.
It's on. Thank you. No, I think there's a very important element that I think we have explained these 2 days is there's no possibility of thinking big, small, regional, or national if no one has Sargassum. All you have is Sargassum rotting on the beach. That's all you have. And what I think is important is the fact that whether it's at broader Caribbean basin level, at OECS level, or at national level, someone says, I'm going to try and see if I can get Sargassum out of the water. That already gives you not only the issue, the legal issue might be a problem if the Prime Minister wants to go to Mexico to fish for Sargassum. But if you just want to be here between Carriacou and the mainland, then you have no problem because you're working on your side of the sea. But the thing is, to find it, we can help with the early detection. We have all the available means with Copernicus, with other stuff that we can tell whomever wants to go fish where is it coming, when is it coming, and alert. But also the importance of giving the signal that there is going to be fresh Sargassum in Grenada helps the private sector get organized in terms of not only the infrastructure and equipment that Grenada will need, and that's for the Grenadian government to organize its own capacities, whether private or public, but it's already a sign that someone is trying to have Sargassum available for the private sector to experiment with. One of the main problems that the Caribbean and the OECS always speak about in all international fora, and that the European Union is very attentive to, is the fact that large experiments in any country, including the European Union, just don't work at island level because of the small size, the fragmentation, etc., etc. So we have to prove concepts and see whether value chains can be started very small and see if they can scale up. The other thing that I think is important is let's not neglect the environmental benefits of capturing the Sargassum offshore, because even if we wouldn't find someone to sell it to, you would have already avoided Sargassum on the beaches, and you would already avoid the negative impact of Sargassum, big chunks of Sargassum floating or stuck above the coral reefs. And that is already not to be neglected. The third element that I would like to we have one of the, let's say, good ideas of bringing everybody together is that, of course, some of the companies, and there's already some conversation ongoing, some of the companies have said, well, if you are committing or wanting to have Sargassum available for industrial use, we would be looking for investing part of the value chain in Grenada or in the Caribbean, to whomever wants to do that, so that we understand, the quantities. We do proof of concept, which we can then scale. And that, I think, is a major delivery that we wanted from the European Union to support, is that governments and private sector meet and talk about these things. And then I think our job here is not only to facilitate them to come together, but also to put some of the funding, because, as I said at the beginning, in small island development states, scale doesn't happen. So by definition, starting a value chain is not a market option. So you need to work on this until it becomes a market option. And I think that's the type of issues that we want to do with the Global Gateway, is support governments to deliver on public policy objectives with the help of technology, private sector, jobs, etc., etc. So that's a bit I think for us in the European Union, the great outcome of the meeting. I do, however, think that we have put ourselves a strong challenge that now we need to deliver.
You had a final question, Chair?
Yes, I do have a final question, and it can be answered by yourself or the minister. In terms of plans for further sensitization, for people to get a better understanding on the positives that can be derived from the Sargassum seaweed in terms of financial benefits.
Well, no, I think part of the process is the education that has to take place, and that's why having a Sargassum Secretariat, having an information hub is going to be critical, because it's about mindset change. Now, if we simply allow the Sargassum to show up on the beach and to rot and to create a stench, then the mindset is that it's a problem, and you're thinking Band-Aid, which is what the approach has been to a large extent, that you get heavy equipment to pull it off, or you spend a lot of money on intense manual labor to pull it off, and then 2 hours later it's right back. And you have fresh ones, and if you can't move it, then the same process happens over and over and over. So that is not sustainable. And that is simply reacting to what is perceived as a problem. So that's where the mindset and the education has to come in, which is we have to be able to say this is a resource, and how do we utilize the resource? And obviously it requires research, it requires education, it requires investing, it requires piloting projects that people can see. And this conference was a perfect example of this. And so I think we have enough just simply coming out of this conference that we can use to educate our populations within the region about the opportunities that exist with Sargassum for decades to come, probably. And therefore, having a sustained education campaign, I think is just part and parcel of what we have to do, and hence the reason why we, in a sense, put our hands up to say we will be willing to host the Secretariat and the Information Hub, because it gives us that opportunity to, in fact, educate the population about how we can turn the tide on, sorry to be repetitive, how we can turn the tide on Sargassum and convert it into a resource. It's very much the same way. If large amounts of fish were showing up on the beach and dead and rotting, then obviously we recognize it's a problem, and we have to find a way to ensure we prevent that from happening, find out the causes, and then go out to sea rather than wait till it comes to sea. So it's pretty much the same approach that I think we need to make sure that happens, but it requires education. Right? You have to know the type of fish, what's the market for it, what's the price, what are they going to pay, how do you catch it easily. In a sense, you have to do the same thing for for the Sargassum as well. All right. If there are no further questions, then thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen of the media. I wish you a happy Wednesday afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.